Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 285 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the new TV series Star Trek Discovery, and this will include spoilers for the first 9 episodes of the show, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by 3 guests. So first up, we've got our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed and Nightmare magazines, and he also oversees John Joseph Adams Books, an imprint of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. He's the series editor of The Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, and he's also edited many other books, including anthologies of outer space adventure like Cosmic Powers and Federations. So John, welcome back.
Always good to be here.
Then next up, we've got Sara Lynn Michener, who you may remember from our panel on Blade Runner 2049 back in episode 277, our panel on The Handmaid's Tale back in episode 263, and our panel on Star Trek Beyond back in episode 214. She writes about feminism, culture, and politics for Medium, and crafts laser-cut jewelry and soap with swear words inside. She lives in Northern California with a Renaissance engineer, a dog, and a bird, and considers Star Trek her third and best parent. So Sarah, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
And also joining us today is Anthony Ha, who you may remember from our panel on Valerian back in episode 266, our panel on Incorporated back in episode 247, our panel on Black Mirror Season 3 back in episode 227, and our panel on Star Trek Beyond back in episode 214. He covers media, advertising, and pop culture for the news site TechCrunch, and a chapbook of his short stories called Love Songs for Monsters was published by Youth in Decline in 2014. So Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I also just want to mention that Geek's Guide to the Galaxy listeners have now contributed more than $40,000 to the show via Patreon. That's a huge amount of money in the podcasting world, so I just want to give a special thank you to everyone who supported the show, and I also want to give a special thank you to everyone at Patreon, many of whom I was lucky enough to meet last month at PatreCon, without whom Geek's Guide to the Galaxy would not be possible. If you're a regular listener, I hope it's pretty clear by now that doing a show like this is a full-time job, just given our weekly schedule, the length and detail of our episodes, the huge number of guests we feature, and the sheer variety of books, movies, TV shows, and topics that we cover. This podcast makes up the vast majority of my income, and Patreon support makes up the vast majority of the show's funding. And while $40,000 might sound like a lot of money, and it is, if you divide that by the 3 years that we've been on Patreon, I think you'll get a pretty clear idea that I'm doing this podcast because I love it and because I think it's important, and not for the money. For years, Geek's Guide to the Galaxy has been slowly growing its way toward long-term viability, which has been really exciting and rewarding. But 2017 is almost over, and it's looking like this will be the first year that the show brings in less funding than it did the year before. There's no dramatic reason for that. Mostly it's just because we had a few more large donations last year than this year, but it's still sort of disappointing. Currently, we have about 200 people supporting us on Patreon, which is about 1% of our audience. At 1% listener support, the podcast is viable. At 2%, it would be really solid, and at 3%, it would be a huge success, so it doesn't take that many people to make a big difference. I keep thinking about something that happened a few years ago. I went with some friends to a Renaissance fair, and at one point we spent an hour watching a juggling show. It was a fun show, but not great. The juggler kept dropping things, and some of his jokes were kind of tasteless. At the end of the show, he passed around his hat, and I gave him a few dollars. My girlfriend said, "Did you really think he was that good?" And I sort of said, I didn't think he was great, but I did choose to sit here and watch him for an hour, so I figure I owe him something. I think that's a good way to look at it, and I hope we're moving into an era where more and more people will do that. We'll just make it a habit to give small payments to anyone whose work you choose to spend time with. And so if you're with me on that, I'll just point out that Patreon is quickly becoming the go-to platform for supporting writers and artists online. You just have to sign up for Patreon once, and then it's really easy to support multiple creators, and also to shift your support from one creator to another depending on what you're most excited about. So I really hope everyone will consider doing that. And as always, if you want to support Geek's Guide to the Galaxy, you can sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And you can also make a one-time contribution via check or PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And if there are any rewards we could offer, topics we could cover, or changes we could make that would motivate you to sign up, please let us know over at geeksgalaxy@gmail.com. All right, so now let's get to our panel. Okay, and so this show, Star Trek Discovery, starts out with kind of a special 2-part episode with lots of spaceships exploding in it. So, John, what did you think of this 2-part opener?
Well, I thought it was a little bit of a confusing way to start things off. I feel like the show sort of gets better as it goes along, but it's especially weird, like the two-part opener, because CBS decided to air the first part on CBS, the actual network, and then the rest of the show is only on CBS All Access, the digital, streaming platform. So it's like, if you watch the first episode, you haven't really seen the first episode. You've only seen half the first episode. So I thought that was weird, but I mean,
that was the plan, though, right? Is it sort of like a cliffhanger, and then everyone's just supposed to go over and sign up immediately for CBS All Access so they can see the second part?
I mean, I guess, but I mean, it's just, if I felt like it left you in a weird place, like that you don't really get the experience of what the show is. I mean, and the show doesn't even really start until episode like 3, I think, really, or 3 or 4. I can't remember which episode where like, they finally get their own captain, and I think that's episode 3, or they actually get on the Discovery. The first 2 episodes, it's like they're on the other ship, right? But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, just like overall, like I like the show, but I have like a lot of like little complaints about it that like keep me from like loving it wholeheartedly. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, so the first 2 episodes, it's very, very explodey and very war focused, which isn't my preference for Star Trek, but they did a pretty good job with it. I mean, we can nitpick a lot of the specific details of that, but I figure let everybody else weigh in first.
Well, yeah, let me just say, I mean, I thought the production values of these first 2 episodes just blew me away. It was just, it looked so much better than I was expecting the show to look. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it looks great. Yeah, I mean, all of the effects look great. All the costume design and everything looks really good. Yeah, I don't have any complaints with that. It all looks fantastic.
Well, so how about Sarah? What did you think of these first 2 episodes?
I thought it was a really bold choice, and one that ultimately, once I realized what they were doing, I feel like I approved of. I mean, they essentially started or spent 2 whole episodes on what is essentially a flashback. Because the story isn't that. The story is not, what happened aboard the first ship with Giorgio and so forth. So it's really interesting because they could have, actually just started it with episode 3 and then slowly gave us pieces and pieces of those first 2 episodes, the way that flashbacks are usually done. But I think it was more emotionally effective to do it the way that they did it. Because they were also kind of telling us, by the way, we're doing something different with this, and we don't, it's almost as if they were trying to say, we don't give a fuck. It's like they were, just like, we're going to kill off the main character, after the first, main episode, and, but ultimately I think that it's very effective because you are so much more emotionally invested than you would be if they kind of petered that information out over the course of the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, they could have said, "I don't give a fuck," because now you can swear on Star Trek.
Right.
CBS All Access, everything goes.
Well, yeah. So let me just say, maybe for people who may be listening to this who don't have CBS All Access and are just trying to experience the show vicariously through our conversation about it. So in these first 2 episodes, we get introduced to our main character, Michael Burnham, who is a black woman. And she is a high-ranking officer on a ship called the Shenzhou, something like that, under the command of this woman, Giorgio, who is, it's, help me out with this actress's name.
Michelle Yeoh.
Michelle Yeoh. And so they discover an object in space, which turns out to be sort of a Klingon mausoleum or something. And there's a showdown between the Federation and the Klingons, and Michael Burnham ends up committing mutiny because she feels like they have to attack the Klingons, and Starfleet isn't going to do that if she doesn't take bold, decisive action, and all hell breaks loose, and Giorgio, her mentor, dies, and a lot of other people die as well. I think it's also useful context that Michael is human, but she was actually raised Vulcan because her whole family was massacred by Klingons.
So kind of, all fits into the plot line here.
Yeah. So Anthony, am I missing any important details here?
No, I mean, I think that's pretty much covers it. I mean, I think one of the things that is interesting about that sort of context, or maybe slightly confusing about that context, is also then to what extent Michael carries responsibility for what happens afterwards, for Georgiou's death and for the battle, because it seems like everyone in Starfleet basically blames her for starting the war with the Klingons, which I don't really think is completely borne out by what you see in those two episodes.
Well, right. I mean, I honestly found the mutiny a little hard to believe. Did anyone else? Sarah, what did you think about this mutiny thing?
I didn't find it hard to believe if within the context of her Vulcan upbringing. And, I mean, first of all, you have clearly she still has some form of PTSD from her childhood experience, right? And so but I think that if it was just that, it wouldn't be enough to make it believable, because she would know that, Starfleet is a naval organization. They are going to not respond well to this. They're not going to suddenly go, oh, you're right. We should just, not only throw the captain's orders out the window, but also throw Starfleet's orders out the window, which is clearly never to attack first. That is just not who Starfleet is, if we're going to personify Starfleet. And so, but I think that part of her decision is mainly the Vulcan part. She had just spoken to Sarek, and she strongly believes that she is genuinely trying to save everyone. She strongly believes that everyone's going to die. And, so it's kind of interesting that to me, there was kind of a moment of unbelievability, and then I was like, you know what, though, she really has been raised to think logically, and in many ways, her decision may have saved lives. We'll never know.
It doesn't seem like a Vulcan thing to do. I mean, you guys know a lot more about Star Trek than I do, but has that ever been established before, that the Vulcans would believe that you have to fire first on Klingons, otherwise they'll just walk all over you?
I don't know that you get a strong sense that they're particularly pacifistic. I mean, they're logical, but I mean, I think it right. At least I haven't seen, like, especially some of the later series, but my sense, it wasn't what I would have guessed would have come from, like, an episode called Vulcan Hello, but it didn't totally, contradict my sense of how Vulcans work.
Yeah, I don't think that the logic and the pacifism are supposed to go together in any way. I think that Vulcans, if anything, would severely look down on the Klingon culture. And so they would see it from the perspective of, okay, what do these people need in order for us to effectively communicate with them and to figure out what that is? It does kind of make sense to me that they would just figure out, well, logically, these people value war, and that's what we're going to give them.
I was going to say, one thing about the way the plot plays out, I was kind of feeling like it would have potentially been more satisfying, sort of just sort of narratively, if so Michael was the lone survivor of a previous Klingon massacre. I thought that that's what was going to happen again. That, because, like, basically most of her crew dies in this battle, but she's not the only survivor. There's multiple survivors from her ship, including Saru, and there's that woman that's on the bridge that has the little implant on her head, which I don't know if we've ever heard her name before, but there's a couple of, I think there might be other survivors as well, but certainly those two, in addition to Michael. But I kind of thought, like, oh, like, that would have made narrative sense for her to again be the lone survivor. But yeah, that's not what happened. Yeah, I mean, it was, well, and also it's like, even as I was wondering if that might happen, I was like, well, it's clearly not going to happen. They're not going to spend all that time designing a character like Saru and then, like, let him die after the first 2 episodes. Although, like a lot of things on this show, like, his character is kind of one of those things where you kind of wonder as a Star Trek fan, it's like, well, how come we've never seen this race before? Like, I mean, because this is supposed to take place before, it's before the original series, right? Like,
yeah,
right before
it's about 10 years before, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, how come we've never seen that race before? Do they get entirely wiped out? Like, did their threat ganglia not warn them of this, this threat that wipes out their whole planet? But I don't know, there's things that, as the series goes on, that I kind of have some ideas about that. But anyway,
Well,
I don't want to get too far ahead of
yeah,
ourselves.
well, let me say about that character Saru, because he is in the first episode. So it's Doug Jones plays him, who also played Abe Sapien in the Hellboy movies, and he's a very, very tall, slender actor, and is also a former contortionist, and so he plays a lot of creatures, inside costumes and prosthetics and things. And I really liked him in this. I thought that Saru was one of the least silly-looking humanoid aliens I think I've ever seen in science fiction.
Yeah, no, he looks really good. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and let's say then on that, what you guys think of the Klingons? Like, I thought they were pretty cool. I mean, they look much different from Klingons in, say, Next Generation. I was never, to be honest, super attached to the way that the Klingons looked in the past, so I don't have a whole lot of attachment to that. But as sort of how about Sarah, as more of a hardcore Star Trek fan, how did you feel about these new Klingons?
I mean, I understand that, the Klingons' look has been messed with many times. So in terms of, continuity, I'm like, okay, I guess that's what they're going to do again. And at first it was like, okay, so these are sort of vaguely Egyptian orcs, basically.
Yeah.
And it was weird. But I'm like, I love the show on so many other levels that I have faith that that there's going to be some kind of reason will emerge for them going to the extent of making them so different.
Yeah, so I had some issues with it, and not just as like a Star Trek continuity person, obviously, yeah, like they've messed with the look of them before, so that's fine. I expected them to make some changes like that. One of my complaints is that I feel like the makeup is too it's too static. It's too hard for the actors to really fully emote as much as I would like them to be able to.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a firm mask that's really hard for them to really act in. And so I feel like that holds it back a little bit. But my other concern about the change of the Klingons is how the language is so different. That was way more that threw me way more than the visual changes, because it's I've heard a lot of Klingon spoken on Star Trek before, and it's this is so different, and it's I don't know, I'd love to get a linguist's point of view on this. Is the way that they speak, is that does that make sense as a total alien language that it sounds so weird to me? Because it's they talk so slow, and it's so different from what we've heard before that I can't even make any sense of it. And at the same time, it's and then this is a more minor point, but it's when they subtitle the Klingon text, I like that they do that, but I'm why did they pick that weird, stupid font that they put it in? Just put it in a plain font. It's not, they're not, it's like the complaint, Daniel Jose Older and folks, point out, oh, don't italicize words that are in Spanish, because they're not pronouncing it a certain way, they're just saying it in Spanish. And it's I feel like this is doing the same thing, but with an alien language. It's oh, well, we can't just put it in regular text, we gotta put it in this ornate font. It's no, just put it in regular font. It's really bugged me. Anyway.
See, Anthony, what did you think about the font?
I didn't have strong feelings about the font, but partly because I agreed with most of what the other things John was saying, because the Klingon scenes are definitely my least favorite part of the show, because, yeah, it's the makeup, I think, looks cool, but it's hard for them to get a great sense of their expression, and the character, and all the Klingons kind of look kind of similar, so it's kind of hard, it can be hard to tell which Klingon is talking in which moment, which is why I think they had to introduce things like scars and makeup and things like that. So I think it's hard to, tell the difference between some of the Klingons, and then also when they speak in this monotone that is this sort of, my eyes just, it doesn't register as dialogue. It just feels like everyone's sort of declaiming this speech that that doesn't really convey any meaning or emotion. And so I really did not enjoy those scenes.
All right, so mixed feelings about the Klingons. I thought they were kind of cool. I agree with you guys that the makeup is very heavy, which limits the ability of the actors. But I feel like they're not going to cast actual aliens, so I have to give them some, latitude for that kind of stuff. But
sure,
I don't know. So yes, obviously mixed feelings on the Klingons, though. Okay, anyone have anything else they want to say about these first two episodes before we move on to episode 3?
I guess the one other thing I wanted to bring up was just the experience of watching them for the first time. I think they'd done a pretty good job of like really not revealing that much about the show. So it was to me like just like a constant surprise of like, oh, this is what is happening. Oh, I guess we're not even going to spend that much time on this initial ship that we're seeing. Because, I think there was a sense that there were going to be these two ships in the show, these two different captains. But because like I really like went into it having been almost entirely unspoiled for the storylines, I think, like, especially just watching these first 2 or 3 episodes was just really a great experience from just, a sense of just like nearly constant surprise.
Well, yeah. Let me say, yeah, I mean, I was kind of disappointed that I thought Michelle Yeoh was actually going to be in the show, and I thought the relationship between her and Michael Burnham was really interesting, and so I was sort of disappointed that she dies right away, pretty much, and I'm like, oh, she's not actually the captain. That was a little bit of a letdown for me.
Totally. That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, I wish she was in the show more. I really liked her character. I agree. I thought the dynamic between her and Michael was great, and would have been really interesting to see more explored given the mutiny and everything. Like, like what would have happened? Like, how could they have reconciled that if she had lived? But yeah, it's yeah. I mean, that was definitely a disappointment.
Okay, so then moving on to episode 3. So we pick up 6 months later, and Michael Burnham has been court-martialed and is on her way to prison or something. And her ship gets... Boy, now it's been a while since I watched this. Hold on. Something happens to the ship gets attacked or something, right? I remember the captain... It's
like a shuttle that gets, like, there's some weird, like, alien, like, bugs or something that start eating away at or, like, they suck up the electricity or something like that.
Yeah, and so then she gets rescued by this ship, the Discovery, and even though she is a convict, the captain, who's Jason Isaacs, seems like he doesn't care a whole lot about rules and stuff like that, and so he welcomes her aboard and kind of makes her a science officer, and we get the feeling some weird stuff is going on this ship, and people are very suspicious of her. And it's very much not a traditional Star Trek setup where there's, the crew is very supportive of each other and there's not a lot of conflict between the crew. This is not a happy crew to start off.
Well, I feel like that a lot of that is set up to show what a big deal it would have been to have not just a mutineer, but their first mutineer. That would have been, because a lot of the hostility that we see in that first episode where they're showing the Discovery is because it's directed at Michael Burnham.
I mean, you don't feel like there was sort of a weird dynamic on this ship even before she got there, though?
Well, they definitely are allowing, for better or worse, I think, they're definitely allowing the crew to be more quote-unquote human than previous. I think that previous iterations of Star Trek, they were definitely like, okay, well, we've solved petty bickering and we've solved all this stuff that Star Trek is kind of known for. And they've really taken that to the next level. And part of that may also just be a reflection of Starfleet at war and getting to know a ship's crew, in a period where people would be more tense, things would be a little bit more, it's not a relaxing familial environment that, there would have been on the TNG Enterprise, for instance.
Right. So I agree it's interesting and different, but I sort of had mixed feelings about it because that is one of the things that makes Star Trek special to me is that you sort of go into this better future and there's just something interesting and different about that.
Right.
And if I want, because these characters all act pretty much like people that I would interact with on a, they don't seem they don't seem much different from 2017 people that I know. See, Anthony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a balance that Star Trek has always had to sort of strike of, I think, wanting to have somewhat idealized versions of these characters, but at the same time not sort of like leeching all drama and believability from it. And obviously this show veers more towards the kind of, fallible human characters. I guess the other thing I think about is if I think about a show like Next Generation, that the crew members of the Enterprise are all seem like genuinely good people, but that there's not necessarily a sense that all of Starfleet is quite this enlightened. I mean, that a lot of storylines revolve around Picard, having to deal with other captains or other admirals who are doing, shady things.
Yeah.
And so I guess, again, it felt different for sure. I mean, particularly just the dynamic where you can't trust the captain of the ship, which, I mean, starts to get into what happens in later episodes, but that just makes me like really, just the show feel really different from any other Star Trek show. But it didn't feel like it was totally breaking the rules of what Star Trek has done before.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying there, Dave. I mean, and it's like, yeah, it definitely has this very different feel as far as the characters go, and like that, and they're clearly just not trying to do that in this Star Trek. They're not trying to have that sort of a paragon of virtue type of character, or that sort of idealized version of humanity, set of characters like we had on previous Star Treks. Although I also wondered if part of it was, like part of it's like, clearly like, yeah, like. Like Sarah was saying that, well, they're at war, but then also it's like, the Discovery is not the flagship, right? It's like this, some kind of weird experimental ship or something, right? Even before they get the spore drive. And Lorca is like a weird, like plays by his own rules guy or whatever. Like, so it's like, whereas the Enterprise was the flagship. And so, although, I mean, even on Voyager, which was not a flagship, in any way, they behaved in this sort of more idealized fashion. So, I don't know. I mean, they're clearly trying to go more gritty and stuff, and I have some theories about why that might be, besides just because they wanted to be gritty. But yeah. But yeah, it definitely gives it a different feel.
Well, let me just say, because there's kind of an interesting history of this that, I don't know if there's this documentary, I don't know if you guys have seen, called Chaos on the Bridge, where it's about the making of Star Trek Next Generation. But that basically they said that by the time Next Generation came around, that Gene Roddenberry he had been praised so much as a visionary that in the views of some people, he had kind of started to buy into his own hype a little bit too much and wanted the show to be visionary. And wanted the crew to be this better version of humanity in the future, and that the writers really rebelled against that because they're like, oh, it's just impossible to tell dramatic stories when the crew all gets along, and that was sort of a constant source of tension. And then after Roddenberry died, Rick Berman sort of tried to carry on that legacy, and he's a producer, and so like he had a more active role in Voyager, and so the crew in Voyager is more like that, whereas he had less of a role. My understanding is on Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, and so there's a little bit more sort of conflict between the crews and on those shows. But that has been sort of like a tension throughout the whole history of Star Trek, is how do you tell dramatic stories if the crew is all going to be getting along with each other all the time?
Yeah, and to me, it's so much more important what kind of tension you're talking about, rather than whether or not there is or isn't tension. Like, it would bother me if Star Trek started to have the kinds of dramatic tension that are known tropes in our universe. So, for instance, two women arguing about a man, that kind of thing. If that happened on Star Trek, I would just weep. I would be so sad. I think Roddenberry's vision was not necessarily saying that humanity had evolved to adopt these beliefs, but that humanity had embraced a different culture, and there was nothing biological about this change. And so, to me, that's even scarier, because it means that it can be revoked anytime. It means that it can be established more or less on certain ships under the direction of different captains. It's just a social order. And so that's very fragile.
Okay, so Michael Burnham is on this new ship, the Discovery, and in episode 3, they kind of find this derelict ship and head over to it and are attacked by some sort of giant monster, and the episode ends with the captain kind of having taken this monster into custody. And at this point, I was like, okay, this is just not seeming Star Trek at all to me. This is, I mean, like my impression of the first two episodes was like, oh, this is a lot better than I was expecting it to be, but this feels a lot more like Battlestar Galactica than Star Trek to me. And then with episode 3, I was kind of about ready to bail at that point. Because it was just like, what, now they're going to, there's like a monster on the ship and stuff. I don't know. But then in episode 4, it turns out that this monster isn't really a monster. It's kind of like a misunderstood, alien creature. And that's much more Star Trek-y to me. And then they actually need it to set up their new spore drive, which allows them to instantly teleport anywhere in the known universe or something. And so, I liked sort of after episode at the end of episode 4, once that kind of stuff is established, I was getting a lot more on board with this show. I don't know. So, did you guys have a similar trajectory with the episodes, or much different? Or see, John, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I started to feel more like Star Trek. Certainly, yeah. Like you say, around the same. I think I was having the same sort of trajectory there, because yeah, I mean, like the first 2 episodes, like it felt like Star Trek in this in the sense of like every now and then they'd have some kind of big military sort of oriented arc, like maybe it's a 2-parter or like they just do a single episode or whatever. So it's like we've seen that with Star Trek before, so that wasn't so dissimilar. And obviously there's a lot of stuff with Klingons fighting the Federation and all that. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it kind of felt like that sort of exploration type of episode when they encounter the weird alien creature. And then although they also clearly make it or they definitely make it clear that that this isn't your father's Star Trek or whatever, because when they like experiment on it basically, and like basically it's like it's like, oh hey, we can use this thing to make our drive go, and and then only like later realize like, oh wait, actually we're hurting that thing, so it's like it didn't really seem like a really kind thing to just play. Hey, let's see if we can make our spore drive go, but
at the same time it happens fairly quickly, the jump between, I was worried when, as soon as you start seeing that the monster is just this poor sad tardigrade, you just, and they did a really good job, by the way, making that emotionally affecting, and you really feel for this creature. But like basically in the course of 1 or 2 episodes, as soon as they realized that it was sentient and they were hurting it, they were like, oh, okay, we're going to let it go. And to me, that was amazing, because I was so worried. I was like, oh God, are they going to do that thing where they spend several episodes, with some characters wanting to exploit it and some characters wanting to free it? Because I didn't really want to watch that. I was like, and so it was nice to me that it's to be reminded, oh wait, it is still Starfleet. They do still operate in this humanist universe, where as soon as they realized that they were hurting it, they were like, okay, well, we need to let it go, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I have to say, I mean, I think that the show, as I said, the production values are fantastic. I think in general the acting is really good. I think the writing is generally pretty good, but just every once in a while there's just like some moment that I find just bafflingly off. And one of those was the part where the security chief is like, I'm going to cut its claws off, and opens up the cell and like is obviously going to die, and then it like dies 10 seconds later. And I'm just sort of baffled by, there were just like moments like that where I'm just like the rest of it is so like is fairly strong, and then every once in a while there's just like a scene like that where I'm just like, huh? Like how did this get into the show?
Totally agree. And like, I don't remember what episode it was in, but like Michael like subverts a security system that's powered by breath for some reason. Like it's like she steals like Tilly's pillow because it has her drool on it, and she uses that to like defeat this like breath-based security system. I'm like, what? That's so stupid though. Like I mean, they would have like retinal scans. Like, is that more secure than a retinal scan? It doesn't seem like it.
Well, they did say though that was a setup for her.
It was a setup?
Yeah, like Captain Lorca did that on purpose and made it easy for her to crack on purpose because he was testing her. Like she called him out on that. Like this was obviously an extremely easy way to bypass security. And I don't think since then they've ever showed that breath thing happen again. Right.
Yeah, I didn't remember that they called it out. But I mean, it seems like a. Wouldn't she have been confused that this was even a thing that was used on a starship though? Like, it's like she goes and easily subverts it, but it's like, wouldn't she be like, what the fuck is this? What is this? This is not security. Like, what kind of ragtag ship am I on here? Like, anyway, I don't know. But that was one of those things. And then there was whatever episode. It's the one that fucking Akiva Goldsman wrote. But I think Michael's like crawling through like a Jeffrey's tube or whatever, and she starts like reciting. Was it Alice in Wonderland or something? She like some kind of thing. And it was just like so annoying and stupid. It's like, why are you saying that out loud? And like, what? I mean, it's I don't know. It was just really annoying.
I love that part.
Oh, really? I hated it. I hated it so much. And it's like, even if she was going to recite something, shouldn't she have recited some kind of Vulcan thing? She was raised Vulcan.
Well,
like,
but
I mean, sure. I mean, I guess she would have been exposed to human culture, but I mean, like, she's Vulcan though. Like, in that kind of intense situation, she's going to recite Alice in Wonderland. Like, I don't know.
She's
or whatever
human,
it was.
and they have actually. I mean, they keep bringing that book up, and to me, the whole show feels kind of like an Alice in Wonderland experience for Star Trek fans. Right? It's like this sort of bizarre, like I think that the use of that story in particular will become stronger as more episodes come out.
But that's like such a heavy-handed way of trying to make the comparison to Alice in Wonderland. It's like, have a character randomly recite part of the text, like in this intense situation. Like, I don't know, I just hated everything about that.
I mean,
Okay.
How often have they done the same thing with Melville, with Shakespeare? I mean, this is like, to me, it was sort of an adorable ode to classic Star Trek, because they do that all the time. All these characters who have physical books, physical copies of, one or two very known to us books, and you're like, why don't they have books that are known to them in their time? But so that to me, it was just sort of part of the whole okay, this is classic Star Trek feel.
Okay, I think John and Sarah are going to have to agree to disagree on this one. But I want to pick up Sarah on, because I think the Alice in Wonderland connection is kind of interesting given the spore drive, which somehow involves mushroom, like trans-dimensional mushrooms or something like that. Which is kind of a very Alice in Wonderland sort of concept.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anyone have a more robust explanation for how the spore drive works than I've just given here?
I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think it's something about like how like mycelium or whatever, or like mushroom, sort of fungus creature or fungus, fungus has like this weird network of interconnectivity or something, like in like the real world, like where it's like theorized like they have some kind of almost like a joint consciousness kind of deal, like I don't know, it's all kind of weird.
Oh, but you're saying that in real life, if you see a patch of mushrooms, that underground they're all connected to each other and they're kind of like one like hive.
Right. I think, I kind of vaguely am recalling reading about something like that, but I think that's what that's trying to riff on. But then I'm not really sure how it goes from that to like, being able to transport to anywhere in the galaxy or whatever.
Yeah. So the crew member who is sort of in charge of this spore drive technology project is this guy, Paul Stamets. So, Anthony, what'd you think of this character, Paul Stamets?
I like the character a lot because that he's, sort of initially kind of standoffish and not really interested in engaging with Michael, and is super focused on, just developing this technology. But over the course of several episodes, you kind of see him warm to her and understand, some of the things that are driving him. And I think Anthony Rapp is just really charming, playing the character. So I'm not sure that we've seen sort of the full kind of extent of his. I think there's still a lot of room to kind of explore his personality, but in terms of what we've gotten so far, I think he's one of the most engaging characters.
Yeah.
Right. I think we should mention that this is the first openly gay character in a Star Trek TV series. Mm-hmm. And so this character, Paul Stamets, is married to the ship's doctor, whose name I didn't write down. But he's the guy from My So-Called Life, if anyone remembers that.
Woohoo!
Right. And I think the way that they're introduced as a couple is really fun, like just seeing them kind of like brushing their teeth together, but then having that sort of slightly more horrific or eerie moment at the end. And just their whole relationship where the doctor is very much like, this is all a terrible idea. this is all bad, but like I'm not going to sort of like try to talk you out of something that you're obviously, dedicated to. I think a lot of their relationship dynamic, just seems to work really well.
Yeah, so this was one thing I really liked about the show, and this is something that John, that we talked about in our Star Trek wish list episode, back when this show was first announced, before we knew any details about it, but that we did want to see more diversity in the show, and having an openly gay couple and having a black lead character was, I think, very much the kind of things that we were hoping to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they definitely did a pretty good job with that. I saw one of our listeners, when you had asked what did people think of the show, one of our listeners mentioned that she had issues with the treatment of gender on the show, but I wish she had explained what she meant more. I didn't quite know why she was saying that. Did anybody else have any issues with that? I felt like there's a lot of representation of men and women on the show. I mean, if the complaint is that there's no representation of non-binary people and things like that, I mean, that's legit. But I mean, a lot of the characters we don't even know anything about them yet. So right. I think it might be that there is representation, we just haven't seen it yet. But I mean, I can also see people being like impatient to see, or not impatient, but eager to see that representation actually on screen if it's there. But did anybody else have any issues with that or anything, or?
No, and I saw that comment as well this morning, and I it'd be worth asking what she meant by it, because I couldn't imagine what she meant by it.
Mm-hmm. See, Sarah, what did you think of Sylvia Tilly, who is Michael Burnham's roommate?
I love her. She's great. I mean, it's funny because on Star Trek, you have always so many characters who are very polished. And you just assume that that's part of Starfleet training, and when they do have awkward characters, it's, kind of a Lieutenant Barclay situation where you have characters who are so awkward, it, interferes with their ability to do their job. And very rarely do you just see characters who are, they are who they are, they're awkward, but they're still complex, and it's not the point of that episode. It's part of her character. And so I really love the dynamic between Tilly and Michael, because they're so different, but you can just see Michael warming to her, every episode, and, at the same time valuing her as an individual and valuing her strengths. So I absolutely love it, because I can't really think of a character that we've had on Star Trek that is like that.
Yeah, there was an essay by Ursula Le Guin that I read years and years and years ago. I wish I could remember the exact title, but it's something along the lines of Mrs. Jones on the holodeck, or it's something like that. But she's making this point, basically, is that there are these kinds of ordinary people that you don't almost ever see on the decks of starships and things like that, and that. That in her view, the decks of starships would sort of, the fiction of it would kind of crumble if an ordinary person were to step on, because they're so, it's such a space where that kind of person never exists. And I felt like Tilly was exactly that kind of character. Like, even though I said all these characters kind of seem like 2017 types of people, she's the one who most seems like somebody you would know in real life.
Right. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, David, you do know a lot of, like, effective altruists and rationalists and science fiction fans, which, is quite a bubble.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was saying, my perfect version of a Star Trek show would be, you have a character like Chris Pine's Kirk, and he joins a crew of all Vulcans, and then just learns to be more Vulcan throughout the course of 5 seasons, and then when he's completely Vulcan, the show's over and everyone leaves. Yeah. But
I mean, I would say that as much as I like Tilly is also a character. I just think when she's on screen, it's terrific. But I can, as we were talking about it, made me think about that comment about gender, and that part of the dynamic of the show, right, is that Burnham is primarily her personality seems to be primarily Vulcan, and particularly in her interactions with Tilly is sort of learning to become more human, which I think in some ways then manifests as being like more emotional, and, pursuing like romantic relationships. So maybe becoming sort of more traditionally feminine in some ways. And so I can imagine that can maybe for some people feels a little bit regressive.
I just want to say about the name Michael Burnham, I really liked that because I feel like science fiction doesn't often enough acknowledge the way that the gender associations of names change over time. So like Kelly used to be a man's name and now it's a woman's name and things like that. But then I thought they sort of undercut that by having Tilly say, I've never met a woman named Michael before. I was like, no, come on. Oh, that was so good. And you just kind of like blew it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know that they were actually trying to do anything particularly science fictional. Apparently, it's a thing that Brian Fuller does frequently, is give a female character a traditionally male name. I don't know. I hadn't noticed that, but I saw an article talking about that because people were like, "Why is Michael's name Michael?" And I guess that's the thing Brian Fuller does. So.
All right. So let's see what happens next. So. So they've got their spore drive working, and shortly after that, Captain Lorca gets captured by Klingons and is thrown into a Klingon dungeon where he meets Harry.
Sorry, did we talk about how Stamets actually took over for the tardigrade, and like actually is the person that's powering the spore drive at some point? Or I don't remember when that happens.
Well, no, yeah. So it's before that, but so yeah. So
okay.
I don't know if we explicitly said this, but yeah. So they let the tardigrade go, and Stamets has somehow he got like incorporated tardigrade DNA into himself. Now I'm sort of vague on how that happens, but so
yeah.
This is the problem with the show coming out weekly, so I watched it stretched over the whole time it was coming out rather than binging it like I usually do. But yeah, so somehow he's got tardigrade DNA, and so they can use him in place of this creature to navigate the mycelial network and pop in and out of any location they want. But yeah, so then after that happens, then the Captain Lorca gets captured and gets thrown into a Klingon dungeon where he meets Harry Mudd, who's a character from the original series, and this new character, Ash Tyler. Lorca and Ash Tyler escape together, leaving Harry Mudd behind because he's very obnoxious. And Ash Tyler becomes the new head of security. To replace the former head of security who conveniently got himself killed by the tardigrade. So what do you guys
the really poor head of security.
yeah. There was an opening. There was a legitimate job opening there. But so Sarah, what did you think of this show's presentation of Harry Mudd and this new character Ash Tyler?
I think it was great. I had recently watched the original series Mudd episode, and it's so different. And I mean, it's one of the reasons actually why I don't actually give a crap about canon that much. Like I think that when a show tries too hard to adhere to canon, it doesn't have as much flexibility for creativity. And, even the idea that some people are even suggesting that there would be, that they should build an entire ship based on outdated technology is just nuts. I mean, it's just crazy. And so, when I had watched the Mudd episode, it's so dated. It's one of the most dated Star Trek episodes that we have, in part because of its, reliance on sort of the humor of 1960s ideas of gender roles, to make the story happen. And so, I loved the fact that, you have this completely different Harry Mudd who has just enough of that obnoxious, qualities about him to carry the thread through, but that beyond that, they didn't really feel like they had to, pull too much of it through. Thank goodness. And it also simultaneously, that whole episode, where they deal with Harry Mudd. Oh wait, I guess I'm jumping ahead to the reappearance of Harry Mudd.
Yeah,
so I won't do that.
Let's save that for a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so what'd you think of Ash Tyler?
I think he's a fascinating character. I mean, it's interesting. They brought in a completely new character halfway through this first season, that is immediately one of the main characters and has all of these fan theories are popping up about, Is he
wait,
really a Vulcan?
Let's save the fan theories for a little bit later.
Well, he has all the potential for all of these things are being said about him, all of, without mentioning what any of them are, that, that they just invented a brand new character that's suddenly one of the main characters, and that allowed them to, have all these creative ideas about who he really is. And so there's so much mysterious, about going on Discovery in the captain and in, a couple of the other crew members. And it's great because you've absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And that never happens on Star Trek.
Yeah, I feel like that's another way that they're showing us that this isn't the Star Trek that you're used to. Is because it's like, not only are we going to have a serialized story, but we're going to actually introduce new characters, and we're going to lose some of the characters that you thought were going to be on the show the whole time. Yeah. And people can actually die. We can have when we meet a new character, maybe they actually will join the crew. Whereas, on previous series of Star Trek, it would always be like, oh hey, that person seems like they'd be a great fit for the crew, but then by the end of the episode, it's like, nope, that'll get pulled out from under us,
Yep.
and it's like, yeah, never happens. I mean, 7 of 9 was like the one time that somebody who showed up mysteriously actually joins the crew.
Yeah.
So like that's this, but this is definitely a weird introduction for Star Trek, certainly, and but yeah, no, I thought it worked also.
See, Anthony, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that that the introduction of like Ash Tyler was like pretty. I mean, like, it's just interesting because it was sort of a different, approach to introducing a character for Star Trek. I did think that within the episode, like, how quickly it went from, hey, here's a guy in this prison, oh, like we're going to escape together and we, like, trust each other, to, okay, you should be, like, my head of security, which is getting a little bit into the next episode. And, I mean, I think there are reasons why Lorca does that, but it felt fairly rushed to me. And so I think it took me a couple of episodes to warm to the character, and frankly, I think until I started reading some of the fan theories about who Ash Tyler actually is, I wasn't totally on board with him.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like the show is kind of rushed overall. Like, maybe this is a show that would have benefited from, like if these events had been spread over 10 episodes or 11 episodes or something, that maybe, like maybe some of these like scenes would have had a little bit more impact if they had been able to breathe a little bit more.
Or if there'd been a nice montage where Lorca and Tyler they showed them becoming best friends, and then he becomes head of security. I mean, like that would have, I'm just kidding. But, no, I mean, I agree that it definitely felt like it does happen fast.
All right. Yeah. So now we have an episode called Lethe, which is, really a sort of more of a flashback episode where we learn a little bit more about the sort of the backstory with Michael Burnham and her adopted father, Sarek, who's also Spock's father. And I thought this was kind of cool. There was the logic extremist Vulcan. I thought that was kind of an interesting.
Oh, right. Was that the suicide bomber?
Yeah. So he. Yeah. So the setup for the episode is that Sarek is going on a ship somewhere, and there's basically like a suicide bomber attacks him, and the suicide bomber is a Vulcan who's a logic extremist, and he feels like Sarek has, abandoned the true path of logic and must die. I don't know if that's ever appeared in Star Trek before, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember ever encountering that, but I did feel like I was kind of wondering about the logical. How logical it was the way that suicide bomber actually approached his mission. It's like, oh, well, you're standing so far away from the guy and you're like spending a lot of time talking while your goal is to kill him, right? It's like, well, shouldn't he have like gone up closer to him, like hugged him or something? It's like, but of course, it's like, then that would have guaranteed Sarek would die. But, and we needed that, excuse to let him, survive, for long enough for the plot to happen. But I don't know. That didn't seem like a logical way to approach that particular mission.
Well, that's the thing. If you actually had Vulcans who were always super logical, they would be so awesome. They would never fail at anything. So that's why the whole show should be about them. But I digress. But so how about Sarah? What did you think about this backstory with Sarek and Michael Burnham?
I think it was great. I think it was quite believable because, I think that Star Trek has always flirted with the idea that there are limits to logic too. That logic itself is something that has to be counterbalanced with other things in order for it to work properly. You know, I mean, all of the tenuous arguments between, you know, the good of the many outweighs the good of the one, but there are flaws with that. And so I think that, you know, the relationship with Sarek, and also it really helps to patch any holes, you know, holes in air quotes that people have found with there being, you know, this idea that, well, if Spock had a sister, we would have known about it by now. And it's like, well, actually, maybe not. I mean, to me, it's very plausible that Spock wouldn't mention her, both because she was fully human, and because, you know, not his biological sister, and because she was, you know, the first mutineer of Starfleet, and the list goes on. And Sarek, we know to be a very proud man and a very proud Vulcan, and yet he was clearly progressive within the Vulcan community of, you know, desperately trying to forge relationships with other, you know, other aliens and with humans, and getting more flack for that I think that makes more sense than other series have brought up. You know, I mean, I think that it totally makes sense to me that Vulcans would be against it, and that there would be some, you know, some prejudice on, you know, within Vulcans against allowing humans to study in their world, and against allowing humans to learn what they have learned. So to me, it you know, it made perfect sense, and it really it fits well with what we already know about the character of Sarek through the movies and the show.
Yeah, so just for listeners, so what we find out is that Sarek had two kids, Spock and Michael, who were awesome candidates for the Vulcan Science Academy, but because one is fully human and one is half human, the Academy said they didn't want to accept both of them because they're kind of anti-human. There's some anti-human prejudice going on. And so they said Sarek would have to pick one, and he picked Spock, his biological child, and then Spock elected to join Starfleet and not go to the Vulcan Science Academy. And so Michael was left thinking that she had failed to live up to his standards, when really this was a choice he had made and had kept secret from her all this time. And so there's some amount of resentment, obviously, when she finds that out. Anthony, what'd you think of this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it overall, and I thought particularly the actor who plays Sarek, I'm trying to remember his name, but like the actor playing Sarek, I think is just like really sells those scenes where he's, you know, like having to make that decision, and so I think dramatically it works really well. I mean, one thing I am curious about is if we're going to get more Sarek as the show goes on, is to what extent they're even, and I think I started to feel this a little bit even in this episode, was, you know, to what extent like not showing Spock starts to feel kind of strange, and if they are going to cast like a young version of Spock at some point, or if you know, or if they're just going to have him sort of again be this sort of off-screen presence. But I think it worked well in this episode. It wasn't a problem, and I think that I mean, probably the relationship between Sarek and Michael, I mean, I think is one of the most compelling things on the show. If anything, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of it.
Yeah, I thought I liked the episode also. So remind me, like Michael connects to Sarek's like you know, consciousness or whatever from like really far away, right? Like she's not near where he is, right?
Yeah, no, like, yeah. Does anyone remember somehow? I think like hadn't he like healed her when she was mortally wounded, and now they have this deeper connection or something?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so like I get like, you know, Vulcans have like this whole sort of kind of weird psychic thing, like with the mind melds and all that, and like, you know, I could kind of buy that they could have some kind of connection, you know, whatever. Like I'm happy to go with it, but it's like, but it's like she can do all, like she could have like this you know, connection with him, and like even when like their like star systems apart and everything, it's like it seemed like a little harder to believe that it's like such a weird, powerful you know, connection that can span like light years, or whatever. Like,
John, size matters not.
Yeah.
Right. I know.
Oh, wait,
but I mean,
hey,
hey, the mycelium network connects all things apparently. You know, so like I don't know, maybe they're piggybacking on that. But
yeah, the Katra
you know,
moves across the mushroom network.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know, it's like Yeah, so I mean that's the only thing that really sort of bugged me about the way that all that worked. Like at least if she had to go be in his presence, like that would have made more sense. Especially since like I don't know that we've ever. I mean, again, this is more of a continuity thing, but I mean, like, I don't know that we've ever seen Vulcan sort of psychic telepathy, whatever stuff happen without any contact, right? Because like when they do the mind meld, they have to connect to, they have to touch each other. At least, I mean, maybe that's just to focus the energy or whatever. But I mean, just the idea that you could do it across light years seems bizarre to me. But given that, like we said, that we have a ship that just teleports via a mushroom network, I don't know much to really worry about the telepathy too much.
Well, they've said, or the writers have said that as the season goes on, they'll be bringing it more and more into continuity, so maybe like everyone just forgets how to do the telepathic Vulcan thing, and like everyone forgets how to do the spore, the spore drive technology gets lost somehow, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, I think also in the case of like him, like them speaking, across this vast distance. I mean, I think like you actually see it twice, because you see it first in the second episode when she's like on like the blown up ship and he's able to talk to her. And I guess it is also this unique circumstance where it's not just that they've mind melded, but that in order to save her, he's given her, I guess, a piece of his Katra. So I don't know that that's something we've seen happen that often. I mean, maybe with Spock and McCoy, but like in general, it's not something we've seen before. So I think it feels like, definitely the writers are sort of stretching what's allowed, but I don't think it's completely, ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I accept Vulcan mysticism for what it is. I'm perfectly happy with it. It's just part of the willing suspension of disbelief for me.
All right, cool. So Sarah, you mentioned that Harry Mudd returns in episode 7. So tell us about that.
Well, I loved that episode, and apparently I'm not alone. Like, this is, one of the favorite episodes of Discovery, because it totally pulls a Groundhog Day, and Star Trek The Next Generation has pulled the Groundhog Day effect. And, in the Remember Me episode with Beverly Crusher, and, they are caught in a temporal loop, and they're repeating the same half an hour over again. But they did really interesting, different things with it. In this show, in part because they didn't tell the story through Stamets, which usually they do. Usually they tell it, through the perspective of the survivor, or the one person who knows what's going on, and they didn't do that. But it's just such a fun episode, and the ending feels so much like classic Star Trek to me, with this sort of it's almost like the first campy moment that they had on Discovery, where they, are returning Mudd to, his wife, and he clearly doesn't want to go. And I mean, it's adorable and hilarious, but also feels very much like a standalone episode, even though it's also connected to this broader thing. Because I know that part of, some people have actually complained about that. People like the episodic nature of Star Trek. They like the fact that they are these little self-contained stories. But what I like about Discovery is that they do both. They're telling a long story, but they also are choosing to tell these little stories in between.
One issue I had with that episode was that it comes out toward the end, which I thought there was sort of some clever twists and things, but it comes out toward the end that Michael Burnham is worth more money to the Klingons than the ship is. And I felt like that came out of nowhere for me. I got the feeling that the Klingons didn't really care that much about T'Kuvma, that his faction had kind of, fallen into disfavor, and no one would really pay that much money to avenge his death or anything. So I thought that if that was going to be as central to the plot as it turned out to be, that should have been established earlier. And wasn't.
It did seem convenient.
Right. Especially when the show has done a fair amount of work to establish how all the Klingons are kind of, freaking out about this ship that's attacking them, but it hasn't done, any work at all to sort of give us a sense of how the Klingons look at Burnham, after the events of the first couple episodes.
So, just real quick about the ending of this episode, where, Harry Mudd gets return to his, wife and whatever. Like, so that's one thing that I suspect, like, maybe the Facebook commenter, was talking about in terms of, like, treatment of gender roles and stuff. Like that whole ending did kind of make me raise my eyebrow and, like, give it a little side eye. Like, I don't know if that's, like, the best note to end on there. Like, oh, poor Harry Mudd. He has to be sentenced to a life of, in this relationship with this woman, and it's like, I don't know. It just seemed like a very weirdly traditional sort of, old school type of, thing where it's like, oh, like, the worst thing I can imagine is having to be weighed down by this, by this woman, so I could see people being annoyed by that. But in general, like, yeah, I mean, this episode, like, I really love the time loop thing. It's like, I thought it felt like the most like a Star Trek episode. Like, and actually, the TNG episode it reminded me of was Cause and Effect. Because this episode also starts with the ship blowing up. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, it's like, so the ship blows up. It's like, hey, time loop episode. There we go. Cause like obviously, but, and Cause and Effect does the same thing. And Cause and Effect, like blows up over and over, which I think this one also does. But yeah, I thought it was really fun. I mean, there's these little quibbles that you have all, like, in a lot of these different episodes. Like Dave, you mentioned, like, with the Michael being worth more and everything. It's like, yeah, it's like, there's a lot of little things like this that happen up throughout the show that, like, it's like it stops me from fully loving the show, but I enjoy watching it. And, those things, like, kind of bug me, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to watch the show.
Well, and I thought the ending of this episode maybe was one of the few moments where I felt like this show maybe leans a little too heavily on lore that new viewers, I feel like the Harry Mudd wife thing maybe comes a little bit out of nowhere if you're not already familiar with that character and his backstory.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, he was talking about that he had lost his wife, and I felt like they had established that pretty well, and then it turned, and I think the way they played it in this show, in this show, that they were just like playing on that reversal that he was talking about, like how like he wanted to get back to her desperately, but then really he wanted to stay away from her, so like like I didn't remember any of his backstory as far as having a wife or anything like that. Like I haven't watched the original episodes in years, but Harry Mudd was the original person that brings Tribbles into the mix, right? Isn't he?
No,
he's
that's
not.
That's a different sort of chubby white
Harry Mudd type character.
Man.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, I thought it was Mudd, but because I was just thinking, because one of the other weird continuity things on the show is that when we first meet Lorca, there's a Tribble on his desk, and I'm like, what the hell is that Tribble doing there? Because obviously this is before the original series, and so they wouldn't have discovered Tribbles yet. But I mean, that's like one of the I think it's like kind of a sign that maybe everything is not as it seems. And then this episode also brings up something with that too, when Stamets sees Tilly. I think that's in this episode, right? Where he comes back, he like wakes up from doing something with the spore drive or whatever, and he sees Tilly and he says, "Oh, what are you doing down here, Captain?" And then we learn that like he may be sort of popping into alternate universes or something, Yeah. And so like clearly it seems like he must have popped into some other alternate universe where Tilly was a captain. And so, it's like, I mean, it stands to reason that this is not the main Star Trek universe that we would assume it would be. Like, it's not that the one that we all know and love from Next Generation and all that. It's like, it might be an adjacent one. I saw this on Twitter, so I don't know if it's okay.
Wait, John. If this is a fan theory, let's save that for the fan theory section of the.
Sure. I know. It's like it's relevant to this to right now, but I feel like it's something I would have come up on my own, except that I did see it before I saw the last episode, so I'll restrain myself. But anyway, this episode does give you evidence to wonder, like, are we in the actual universe that we imagined, that we would have assumed at the start? 'Cause maybe not. And coupled with all the different, other continuity things, like, if they are going to pay attention to that stuff, then that also explains that stuff away. So.
Well, one of the things in that vein that I'd wondered about was like, I think from one of the episodes that I think maybe from Lethe was the scene where they're using a holodeck to like practice, like shooting Klingons. And like, I mean, my understanding was that holodecks aren't invented until the Next Generation timeline. So that really threw me off.
Mm-hmm.
But no one else.
Well, maybe they were developed on Discovery.
Yeah, Discovery just developed all
and
the
then
technology.
It was classified for 100 years or however long.
Right. Yeah, because they don't have it on Enterprise either, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, and there's a bunch of things like there's just a lot that we don't, like with the tribbles, or I don't know if you guys noticed that in his secret war room, Lorca has a Gorn skeleton.
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
And it's established very clearly in the original series that Kirk's encounter with the Gorn was like the first contact between humans and that race. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that either it's just kind of like it's an in joke, and so don't take it too seriously for continuity, or like I don't know, or like there's now different special effects, so now it's going to be different, or
right.
They're fucking with us. They know that everyone's going to come out with all of these fan theories, and they're just feeding it the same way that Game of Thrones is like shooting multiple endings. It's great. I love it.
Actually, speaking of in jokes, like I don't know, like I hadn't noticed this, but I saw like an article talking about it, and I don't know if you guys even want to hear this, because it probably will. I mean, it would definitely annoy Dave, I would think. Should I say it?
I like where this is going.
Wait, is this a fan theory?
No, it's not a fan theory. This is an in joke that's in the show.
Oh, yeah, like an Easter egg, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so there's a library at some point that they show, and like in the library, like the books are titled like they're titled after the episodes of like original series and like whatever episodes, and so it's like instead of having like just actual books, they just have like the names of like other Star Trek episodes.
Yeah,
and
so, like
I saw that and I was just
or whatever.
Yeah, and so I was just like, ugh. That's so stupid. Like I hate when they do stuff like that. Like it's like, what's the point of it? Like yeah, we're all watching a Star Trek show.
The point of it is that we're now talking about it, which is exactly what they want us to do.
Don't they want us to talk about how awesome the new show is though? Like instead of like what's with that weird Easter egg? But anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, but I agree with you that's just like that's obviously just a Easter egg, and is not. I hope to God going to have some sort of in-universe,
oh my God,
relevance or something. So who
right.
knows about this Tribble or the Gorn or whatever else? But okay, but before and I want to come back to the other stuff. But first, let's cover these last two episodes. So in the last two episodes, the crew, like three characters, Michael, Ash, and Saru, beam down to a planet where it's like the whole planet is one organism. In order to access a transmitter, and Saru he gets kind of like infused with the like magic alien like fireflies or whatever of this planet and starts acting very strangely, and then we find out that he this is kind of a nice twist, I thought. It was that he's just been afraid his whole life, and this is the first time that he isn't afraid. And he's acting strangely because he's not afraid for the first time in his life, and he doesn't want to lose that feeling. I thought that was pretty cool. I actually thought the whole episode really should have been about that. I thought that was a really interesting idea. And then these peaceful aliens, we find out at the end, have sent a signal to the Klingons to come here because they want everyone to work it all out or whatever, which leads into our big confrontation in episode 9. So, how about Anthony? What do you think of these last two episodes?
I thought they were probably from like a plotting or like just like a basic plausibility perspective. I felt like they maybe suffered the most because it just seemed like there were a lot of things that happened because the writers wanted them to happen, and rather than feeling like they sort of arose organically. I thought like, so for example, like Saru like sort of acting so differently, and then in fact like actively sabotaging the mission. I mean, it's not that you can't do that, but it just felt like they didn't spend the time necessary to like really justify it. And then similarly, I think in the finale where like they have this plan which involves like sneaking onto the Klingon ship and like sneaking onto the bridge and like hiding on the bridge and like like putting this transmitter on the bridge and like all of that. I mean, I guess but no one seems to like bring up the fact that like this is going to be like the idea of like having like a Starfleet crew member like hiding on the bridge of a Klingon ship is a pretty tough like task, even like a giant ornate bridge like we see here. And I think there were like a few other moments like that where it just felt like the writing was a little bit sloppy, but it was entertaining enough that I went along with it. I think particularly in the final episode, but I wish things had been sort of dealt with a little bit more fully and carefully.
Sarah, what'd you think
about
the last two episodes?
I thought they were great. I mean, I am also sort of just not, little things like that don't bother me, and I feel like a lot of Star Trek fans are talking about that kind of thing online, and it's like the Game of Thrones, how far or how fast can a raven fly thing all over again. But, to me, the more important thing is, it was an outstanding episode, especially the last episode, and it really sealed the deal for me in terms of being excited about this show and excited about the fact that we have absolutely no idea what they're going to do with it. Is it a mirror universe? Is Lorca, what is the mix of Captain Lorca in terms of good and bad? And, I love the fact that we have absolutely no idea, and we just know that he's sort of this unreliable character. And, there's a lot of mystery about it. And I think it's just a really wonderful way to end it, for 2 months or however long it's going to be until we get the next batch, the second half of the first season.
John, what did you think of the last two episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I liked them well enough. I'm more with Anthony as far as the various issues I had with it, and I totally like what you were describing episode 8. It's like, I think the way you were describing it, Dave, was basically like what a Next Generation episode version of that plot would have been, and like I would have liked to see that also. But I thought what we got though was pretty good. I felt like there was like a missing transition from episode 7 to episode 8, like, I don't know, like, it just felt like kind of sudden, like, wait, like, we're at this, like all of a sudden we're at this peaceful alien planet, and it's like really important. And I don't know, I felt like there was a missing puzzle piece there between those two episodes, where it's like, almost like, they're like, oh, hey, we gotta get this 2-part, mid-season finale going, so let's just get this thing into gear. And I felt like there was like a transitory episode missing or something to get us to this next episode, to get us to episode 8. But I mean, it was cool to see Saru like being kind of a badass, or like to show what like his species is capable of when when they need to be active and stuff, like when he's trying to stop Michael and he's trying to subvert the mission and all that. But yeah, I mean, it was all kind of cool, and I like that this peaceful race ends up actually bringing about this huge confrontation, in an effort to try to make things nice. But yeah, and then in the final episode with the all the Klingon battle stuff, is like, I don't know, it was okay. I mean, the whole like series of jumps thing, it was like, it was kind of cool, but I don't know, I didn't really follow it. Like, I didn't really follow like the logic of it or whatever. And one thing that has never occurred to me really with Star Trek, the way they talk about the Klingon cloaking device though, is like in the way they describe it in this episode, they keep talking about the sensors, and I'm like, well, but could you just like look out a window and see it though? Like, is the cloaking device just hiding the ship from sensors, and like you could actually just visually see it still?
No, I thought it was saying it was like bending the waves of light around. I guess.
Right.
I don't know what light.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. I mean, because we've always seen it that way. That's always how it's portrayed. And maybe there was just something about the way they were describing it in this episode that made me stop and wonder, like, well, could you just see it with your eyes though? But yeah, I don't know. Like the whole doing the multiple jumps thing in order to triangulate, their position so that you could shoot them even when they're cloaked. Like, I don't know, whatever. It seemed fine, I guess. I if you don't pay too much attention to it, it made enough sense, I guess. But it was entertaining.
Yeah, so I guess I'm more with you and Anthony that I've been more into the show when it started feeling to me more like Star Trek, kind of in the middle of this run of episodes. Mm-hmm. And then the last two were a little bit of a letdown to me. It started feeling a little bit like Stargate-y to me. But then I started reading some fan theories, and I was like, oh, hey, this is actually really interesting. This kind of stuff had not occurred to me. So let's get into these So like, I know people have been just chomping at the bit to go and get into fan theories. So I think, John, you were the first one to start talking about start talking about fan theories. So why don't you take it away here?
Well, I mean, I only have the one. I'm curious to hear what the theories about Tyler are also, but the one that I had read before I got to the final episodes was that maybe that we're in the Dark Mirror universe, which totally makes sense. I mean, in everything that we've seen so far, like with how gritty everything is, and how warlike the Federation is at this stage. How there's this major technology like the spore drive that we've never heard of. The other things that the other continuity things that we've mentioned that, like, don't make sense in the typical continuity. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And given that as we get toward the end of the season, Stamets indicates that he is seeing multiple, into other universes, it would stand to reason that this might be the Dark Mirror universe, or at least, some other one.
So the arguments against this being okay, and also I guess just for like casual Star Trek fans, is that there's this thing called the Dark Mirror universe where there's a evil version of every character, or at least a less good version of every character, which is like a parallel universe. But the thing is that in the Dark Mirror universe that we've seen in previous Star Treks, the Federation isn't called the Federation, it's called the Empire. And their insignia is not the little triangle thing, but it's Earth with a sword through it. So...
Well, right, but this is how many years before Next Generation, though, right? Like, do we ever see them in original series? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah, you see them in one episode.
Okay.
Because there's the goateed Spock.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, this is
with
only
the evil goatee.
right, of course, yeah. And this is only like 10 years or something before the original series, so it wouldn't be like enough time really for them to make themselves into an empire.
Yeah, to change all their uniforms and everything. It takes time.
Yeah. I mean, and their uniforms are really on point on Discovery, so like it would be a real shame to change them.
But so Anthony, what do you think about this mirror universe theory?
I like the idea that it may be some sort of alternate universe, but it doesn't match with my perception of what the mirror universe. I mean, particularly the original series mirror universe, like. It just seems so much worse than anything we see in Discovery that, like, I don't quite buy it yet. I mean, I don't know, but and if it happens, like, that wouldn't totally throw me, but I'm skeptical.
I mean, we could be in some other universe that's not the Prime universe, and is just it's like halfway between the Prime universe and the Mirror universe or something like that.
Right. I think that's definitely true. Whether or not it's the Dark Mirror one, I don't know. I'm less likely to believe that it would be, given that you just reminded me that there was the original series one. I was thinking that it only showed up in Next Generation, because I was thinking like, oh, well, like there's enough time for between now and Next Generation that, it could become actually what we see in Next Generation, even though it's not quite the same.
Well,
but yeah.
I thought it doesn't show up in Next Generation. The Mirror Universe, like a lot of people wanted it to show up in Next Generation.
I think it's original series in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, not until Deep Space Nine. Okay.
Yeah.
I must have been thinking of like the Yesterday's Enterprise universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are Star Trek Next Generation novels that are set in the Mirror universe. So I don't know if you ever
Right.
But that seems like maybe a vague possibility that the whole show is doing one giant fake out and we're not in the Prime universe at all. But then another possibility, Sarah, that you alluded to, is that Captain Lorca is from the Mirror universe. You want to talk about that?
I didn't. Well, actually, see, the one I had brought up was the one about Ash. Being potentially a Klingon.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said.
Oh,
I hadn't heard the one about Lorca being from the Mirror universe, but that does make sense because he is a mysterious motherfucker. So that would make a whole lot of sense.
Sorry, I thought you alluded to it, but no. So this is really, really convincing to me.
Yeah.
So what we know about Lorca is that years before, he was in some giant space battle where his entire crew died and he was the only survivor. So who's to know what happens around that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then when he sleeps with the Admiral, she sees that he has all these scars on his back, where she's like, where did all these scars come from? You never had these before. And then when he, is threatening her with the phaser, she says, you are not the man I knew, which maybe is, more true than she realizes. And also, if you watch closely during the scene where they're reminiscing, she's reminiscing and he's kind of like nodding along, but he never says anything about things that they did together. But then the big thing is in the last episode, right before they end up in the weird... Okay, so in the last episode, they're going to use this board drive to jump one last time. And right before they do it, Lorca says, let's go home, and punches some coordinates into his console by his chair. And if you freeze frame it and look at that screen, it says something like, Lorca override coordinates unknown destination.
Oh, really?
So he's reprogramming the computer to make that jump right after he said, let's go home. So the heavy implication is wherever they've ended up at the end of that episode is home to him.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it seemed clear that he definitely took them into this different place that they ended up. Because he does something. It's like I didn't follow everything that was on the screen, but it's like he clearly reprograms it to go somewhere else than where they thought they were going. But yeah, that's really interesting.
So I don't know. What do you guys think? So Sarah, now that I've blown your mind with the dark mirror Lorca theory, what do you think about that?
I think it's totally the most plausible thing that I've heard, because I feel like the mirror universe has something to do with it. And, the idea that he's the only one that knows about it, is it makes a lot of things fall into place.
And yeah, he does seem a little weird when Stamets is telling him about the, about the other universes or whatever. Like when they're looking at that sort of map, like he does kind of a, like, I don't know, like in retrospect, it's like, yeah, he seems like kind of shady there.
Right, although he always seems slightly, he's like the wheels are turning.
It's because he's from the Dark Mirror universe. He's permanently shady.
Right. Actually, speaking of him, like, is he doing an accent or something? Like, what is he doing? Like, it's sometimes like kind of a sort of Southern Texas accent or something, but then most of the time he just forgets about it. It's like, what is he doing with that? Did anyone else, does that bug anyone else?
Well, he's British, isn't he? So he's suppressing his own accent.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I had no idea he was. I've never heard him speak British. I've only heard him speak with American accent.
Yeah, no. His natural accent is much different than in the show. But this is another crazy fan theory that I heard. And this one, I think this is a little bit more tenuous, although not impossible. But this theory is that the Discovery is part of or some sort of progenitor to Section 13, which is the kind of like Black Ops, Starfleet Black Ops. And support for this is that the Discovery's number on the prow of the ship, whatever, ends with 13. And that when Michael Burnham first comes aboard, like lots of people are kind of they have these sort of like black flak jacket type vests that they wear, and Section 13 people dress in black. But then the Section 13 guy we saw in Deep Space Nine has a particular way of speaking, and the suggestion is that Lorca talks very much in that same way. So that one's a little bit more of a stretch, but it just reminded me of it when you were talking about his accent. So yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but so Sarah, so tell us about Ash Tyler being a Klingon.
Well, I don't think it's plausible personally. I do think what's highly plausible is that he's been brainwashed and programmed. That's certainly something that even Star Trek episodes have dealt with before, but, having the trauma that happened to him was all part of his programming to either be, some kind of spy or, to, be doing something with the Klingons and not even being aware of it, which I think is the most plausible thing. So, a couple of people have said, that he's actually the same character as, I can't remember the names, the
Vok.
2 Klingons that go back to the Shenzhou ship.
Oh.
It's Vok, who's the pale Klingon, and L'Rell is the female Klingon.
Yes. Yeah, so somebody said that we haven't seen them in a while, and that one of them is, even suggesting that it's the same actor who's playing them, and that they have purposefully, sort of withheld that information by not revealing the name of the actual actor, or making up a name or something like that. But to me, that just seems preposterous, because there's so many things that they would have to resolve to actually make it plausible that he's a Klingon. But I do think it's very plausible, this sort of subplot of him having PTSD and, all of the trauma that he endured. And I actually also really want to take this moment to say I love what they're doing with that, in terms of exploring trauma and rape from that angle. And the fact that Ash is open and vulnerable with Michael and talks about it is wonderful to see, because, I think in a lot of science fiction, they touch on stuff like that, but then they have this sort of, they put the uniform back on and, they keep it to themselves, and or they talk to the ship's counselor about it. But, you don't really see this stuff come out in their day-to-day lives. And it's really nice that they're dealing with that realistically and focusing on, despite the fact that I agree with David, the show does move at a very rapid pace. I love the fact that character development is not the thing that's suffering as a result of that.
Well, wouldn't the PTSD flashbacks that we see of Tyler basically discount the theory that he might be actually Klingon?
Okay, wait.
Like, it doesn't just.
Okay, wait. What? Let me say what's in support of the Vok theory. Okay, so there's this pale Klingon named Vok, who we see in the first couple episodes. And the last time we see him, he's talking to L'Rell. They've met up on the derelict Shenzhou. And she says something like, it's been a long time since I watched it, but she says something like, you have to go back to the Klingon mothers or something like that. And he says, like, what do I have to give up or something? And she says, everything. And then that's the last we see of him. And she's also, in a previous conversation, said that her house is the house known for, like, deceit and spying and disguise and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it is established, like in other previous Star Trek iterations, that you can, remake one, like, humans to look like Klingons or whatever, right?
Right.
Right. And then, so then this guy, Ash Tyler, shows up, and he's like this awesome soldier. He's like better than Lorca. And so maybe it's because he's like a Klingon warrior. And then, like, right in the last episode, there's a scene, they have L'Rell in their prison on the Discovery, and Ash kind of stumbles into the room and says, "What have you done to me?" And she says, "I would never let them hurt you." And then he kind of stumbles out. And so I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that somehow, that he's either Vok having been remade, or they've like somehow like projected Vok into his consciousness and could take over at some points in the future, or like take over at some moments or something like that. So that might be one way to explain the flashbacks, is that he is Ash Tyler, but Vok is like haunting his mind.
Yeah, it would actually be interesting to rewatch those flashbacks and, with that in mind, thinking about this theory and see if you can glean anything from it.
I mean, I guess because I'd read that theory before I saw that final episode, and I don't think it definitively clinched it, but I think like it didn't. The flashbacks to me like could also be explained as essentially that when they remade him, they basically sort of gave him fake memories so that for this that backed up this cover story, but that that when he basically keeps flashing back to it, one interpretation is that it is this PTSD. The other interpretation would be that it's that basically he's like starting to like question this sort of cover that's been given to him, and that he's that it it's these false memories is like going over and over again because they're actually not real.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's pretty convincing. And actually, that would make me feel a little bit better about the way he's sort of portrayed as having this PTSD experience. Where I'm like, I'm not sure that was really convincing as like that being how people experience PTSD. So if it wasn't actually that, then actually that makes it better. But yeah, I actually really like that theory. If that would be cool if that's true.
Yeah, so I kind of had that same reaction, John, is that once, as I said, like by the end of episode 9, I was kind of like, yeah, this is all right. But then like, I was like, oh, if they're actually doing some of these things, that makes me more interested to watch it. Because I mean, I was sort of like lukewarm on it's like, when Star Trek Discovery returns, when you boldly go too far, and then it's like, it was like Event Horizon kind of, and I was like, this is even getting more away from Star Trek even than I wanted, but yeah, so I don't know if it's just like if there's some cool twists like that might keep me interested.
Yeah, this discussion has actually made me want to rewatch everything, like just hearing like the different fan theories and stuff, because it's like now I actually want to see if that stuff seems legit. But I mean, just speaking about the show overall, like you were just saying, it was like, feeling sort of like kind of meh. But like one of the commenters was sort of brought up a good point that, like, which I agree with, is that like, although I don't like love the show like 100%. If you compare it to like the first season of other Star Trek shows, like, yeah, I mean, it's really, really good in comparison, because most of the other first seasons of Star Trek shows haven't been great. There's always like a few episodes that are really great. Like, I mean, the first episode of Deep Space Nine is actually phenomenal. Like, it's a 2-hour pilot, and it's like one of the best, like movies of science fiction, like movie length things of science fiction that I've ever seen. Really, it's a really great science fiction just story. And so that's great. But then the first season is like, it's pretty good, but it's not fantastic. And so if you compare Discovery to any of those, it's like, well, it's actually, it holds up really well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that also, like, it feels like, I mean, that they're definitely still figuring some of this stuff out, but like that on a few key things in terms of just like, I like how they're trying, I don't think they completely succeed, but I like how they're trying to keep the core kind of Star Trek-like, but also like move into new areas. And I mean, also the balance that they have between the standalone episodes and the overall narrative, I really like. So there's enough things here that makes me feel like this is like a really promising start.
Yeah, and as John was pointing out, we don't even know really anything about half the bridge crew, like the robot woman or the woman with the thing on her brow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for further development.
The robot woman's like, she's like really bugging me. I'm like, how can there be an android on their bridge and you never like tell us anything about her? Like, I really want to know what her deal is. Like, it's like she occasionally speaks and she's always in the background. And I'm like, that's cool. But like, seriously, like, let us, like, who the hell is that? Like, I want to know.
I refer to her as the Daft Punk woman. Just so we're clear on that.
Right. Yeah, no, she looks really cool though, and like I'm just really curious about her, because it's like, I mean, that's another one of those continuity things, because it's like, well, Data is the first android that we knew of in Star Trek, and he was unique, except for lore, but I mean, like nobody ever figured out how to actually make androids like on any kind of mass level, or mass scale, and so like I'm really curious, like what her deal is. Is she made by humans? Is she like, what's her deal? I want to know.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes the show great to me. I mean, I think that it's given us this very rich tapestry, and it's only shown us a couple of the threads they're in. And it's, I think that it's pretty clear that they're going to explore more of that stuff. And I would prefer that they set it up in the beginning and make us curious and make us ask, so that when they do reveal it, it will feel like kind of a reward for having waited for it. But I mean, even if not, they've really given this a very rich sense of its own history. And a lot of shows, I think, don't do that. And it feels very paper thin And, you know, you're supposed to only focus on, you know, whatever the central point of the story is. So the fact that there's all of that, you know, extraneous stuff set up that they may or may not delve into is, you know, proof that it's doing a good job.
I guess all this just sort of raises the issue of, is there a compelling reason for this show to be set 10 years before the original series rather than after Voyager and Deep Space Nine? Like,
I think we're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, but just in a lot of ways, it would be more, you know, like there's this new spore drive that no one ever knew about before. You know, they've got tribbles and everything. Like, I mean, it just seems like, I don't know. Yeah, that you would think there must be some really compelling reason for them to have set it where they have, because it creates so many issues.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to find out, like Sarah was saying, but I think it's connected directly to this whole other realities thing, and maybe some of these theories, like Lorca being from, you know, the Dark Mirror universe or whatever. Like I feel like all of those threads do suggest putting in this time period where there are going to be these inconsistencies with what we know from previous Star Treks, and it sort of puts you in a situation where it allows the writers to play with some of those things that we think we know, but then we don't actually know. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they better make it worthwhile. Like, and it's not just some random choice to set it at this time period, especially after, like, everyone was like, why the heck did they make Enterprise be a prequel? Like, you know, and they had written themselves into a box with that show.
If they end up making it like Lost, I will cry. I will weep.
Well, just don't let Damon Lindelof get anywhere near it, and we'll be all right.
I actually never heard anyone mention this before, but probably people have. But perhaps the thing with Lorca's eyes not being able to see light is related to him being from, I don't know, maybe he's from like a universe where there's like, it's just dark everywhere, and so, you know, he's kind of adapted to the darkness. I don't know. That's just the thought I had.
I like it.
Yeah, I guess
like everyone in that universe is going to have the dark, starry thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, that would be one way for like, you know, to have like a sort of a secret reveal where it's like somebody walks up on somebody and unawares and like catches them doing some kind of squirty thing in their eye like Lorca does, and be like, aha, you're one of them, you know. So yeah, I don't know. Now that you say that, I suspect that actually will come into play like that in some respect.
I guess the one thing I worry about with that is that I feel like, because I find Lorca to be a fairly compelling character because of how, you know, morally gray he is in some ways. Like, I hope that if he is from this, like from some other universe or from the Mirror universe, like that isn't necessarily supposed to just sort of stand in for like further developing his character. If it's just like, okay, well that explains everything because he's from the Mirror universe, and as opposed to delving into some of that complexity, you know, and sort of treating that as a way to sort of explain things away. I hope that's not the direction they go in.
Let's see. I'm just looking over our listener comments, see if there's anything else we really ought to mention here. I just really want to read this comment we got from Andrew Willett, who's a friend of mine. Sarah, you were pointing out how great this comment is, but Andrew is gay, and he says, he says, when the engineer said to the doctor, "I love you," I was struck down by ugly crying right there in my living room. I never thought it would mean so much to me, but it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, for that comment. I think that is like one of the things that the show does really well is, you know, is this diversity in these characters. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I saw, someone retweeted, or was replying to somebody on Twitter the other day, and it was like some guy who was, pointing to the moment when they first kissed or something. I can't remember. It was something about, Stamets and his husband, you know, interacting. And the guy was like, oh, that's where the show lost me or whatever. And, you know, obviously complaining because it has these gay characters on there. And I'm like, how can anyone watch Star Trek and like think that? Like, you know, it's like, I don't understand it. It's like how do you reconcile everything else that's in Star Trek with like hating somebody else because they're different.
I know.
Or it's like it just doesn't compute.
The whole backlash. I mean, one of the things that 2017 and 2016 have been disappointing for a number of reasons. But, one of them is that I can no longer trust that Star Trek fans are who I thought they were for the majority of my life, and I don't know whether it's just that we only see the online backlash because the people who are angriest and have, this sort of vitriolic reaction are the ones who are being loudest about it and the ones who are commenting on the forums. And, I'm in a couple of Star Trek forums on Facebook. And one guy mentioned, maybe these are the Russians, and they've gone on from meddling in our elections to meddling in our Star Trek forums because
now
they want
gone
us to
too
think
far.
that Star Trek is, it was funny, but it is sort of like baffling for, quote unquote true Star Trek fans, which I would never actually use that term in any other context, like true fans, the whole idea of it. But if there is anything that Star Trek is consistent for, it is this very utopian, very progressive future. And to not get that, it breaks my brain.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, especially if you watch the original series, it's something that it aspires to, but is, still very much a product of its time. But like, to not understand that that's what they were trying to do seems so strange. A related thing that I saw was when I posted like a positive review of like the first 2 episodes. Like, a lot of people were just still really furious about the thing where the cast, they posted a photo where they all sort of took a knee in solidarity with like the NFL players.
Yeah.
And people were just like, I can't believe you're trying to like bring politics into Star Trek. And it was just very, it's like, look, if you disagree with that, you're wrong there too, but at least that is a position you can take. But if you're like, Star Trek should not be political, that is a completely invalid and dumb position.
Right.
Well, yeah, so I guess, I don't know what the long-term plan for this show is. It has been, I guess we should say, renewed for a second season, so they have some, there'll be a bunch more episodes to come. But I wonder if it's possible that the first season will be like the Klingon War, and then in season 2 that'll be resolved, and it will move into more of the, more utopian, progressive kind of, enlightened, peaceful, compromise kinds of, aspects of Star Trek, which I think we could really use,
Yeah. Oh, hey, so before we go, can I complain about CBS All Access a little bit?
Yes.
So, like, obviously, like, there's been a lot of people complaining this here and there about, having to subscribe to the service, whatever. Okay, but whatever. If we look aside from that, like, just looking at it as a service, like, it was so frustrating to get everything set up and just working correctly. Like, I tried it on Chromecast and it kept like not working correctly on my TV. And then I, got the app on my Xbox One and I was watching it on there. And then it's like, and it would like sort of randomly, forget which episodes I'd watched and which ones I hadn't watched yet. And I'm like, come on, guys, this is like very basic functionality of a streaming service. But then also, and like I have the lowest level subscription, that has the most commercials. And it's like, it crashed several times, like, while it was running one of the commercials, and I had to like reload the whole episode and like fast forward back to where I was. Or no, well, maybe no. I can't remember if I had to fast forward if it remembered. But anyway, I had to reload the episode because it crashed. And then also I kind of resent that they don't put the credits at the end of the episode. They make you watch one more commercial break before they let you know that, oh, yep, nope, the episode's over. It's okay, you can turn it off now.
Oh, man.
It's like, they don't even show the executive producer credit, which is usually what they would do before they go to commercial. But they're like, nope, we got to get this one more commercial break in case, just for any of you complete this who want to make sure that this episode's definitely over. And or if you want to watch the coming attractions. But
yeah, it's worth the extra few bucks to not have to deal with that. Like, their app still is buggy, and I think that maybe, they did this as an experiment and they didn't necessarily put the money into the app that they did into the show. But, and they're learning, like, they acknowledged that there was like 1 week where everybody had tech problems and, it was crashing for everybody. But we have the commercial-free version through Apple TV, and it works, 90% of the time, but it definitely is among the buggier apps that I've had through Apple TV.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be more sympathetic if it was like a little startup company or something. It's like CBS. It's like a huge corporation. Like, come on, guys.
Well, but I mean, I think the thing is that you can. I mean, I just watched this all on my laptop. I didn't have any problems, and I paid for the commercial-free thing, which I think was $10 or $12 a month or something. And you could just wait until the whole season 1 is done and just pay $12, whatever, and watch the whole thing and then cancel it, I guess. I mean, but I feel like...
If you don't want to pay for Star Trek, man.
but that's the thing, is I feel like, you know, like it costs money to produce like science fiction shows with spaceships and aliens and stuff. And, you know, I know it's a pain. You're like, oh, I already subscribed to Netflix and like Hulu and whatever. But, you know, I just feel like, you know, you kind of get what you pay for at some level. Yeah. And, you know, this show isn't going to, you know, if people aren't paying for stuff like this, it's not going to exist, you know?
Yeah, it drives me crazy. In all the Star Trek groups, the months leading up to Discovery, there were so many people who were complaining about having to pay for television. And I'm like, I'm sorry that apparently you went to bed last night in 1989, but this is not how this works anymore. We don't, and thank God, I much prefer the ability to watch every show that I watch without any commercials at all, you know, and I love the fact that we can also pick and choose what we want to support and what we want to pay for. I mean, you know, even 10 years ago, if you wanted to watch something on HBO, you had to get 300 channels that you don't want. And so the fact that we can have all of this a la carte is miraculous, and people should be, you know, just bending over backwards to pay money for good science fiction because it deserves it. It's worth it.
Yeah, I do wish that I could subscribe but just like tell CBS, like, no, I'm paying all this for Star Trek. Like, put all of this money that I'm giving you, like, put that on the Star Trek ledger, because that's the only reason I'm subscribing to this shit. Don't you dare give any of it to Big Bang Theory. None of my money goes to Big Bang Theory. I mean, I also watched The Good Fight, but still, like, I'm subscribing to it because of Star Trek. Like, I want my money to count for that. Like, I mean, like, for something like The Expanse, which we also love, you know, Dave and I at least.
Oh, I also love The Expanse.
Yeah, like I would love to be able to actually just, like, pay money for that. Like, I mean, I guess I could just go buy the seasons too. You know, it's like I just recorded on my TiVo, but you know, it's like that's the kind of thing that I like being able to support in that way. Yeah. So it's nice that we can actually do that. In the case of Star Trek, obviously it's the only way we can see it. But although I guess you can actually just buy the season after it completes or something on iTunes, right? Or can you buy the individual episodes or not until the season's over?
For The Expanse, you can buy the individual episodes on iTunes.
Right. But for Star Trek, I think they also, it is going to be on iTunes at some point, but maybe not yet. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. But the thing is, John, if you're paying for CBS All Access and you're only watching Star Trek, they must know that, right? Don't they? They look at
totally
that?
know that.
They must have that data.
Sure. Yeah, and I can, but they can't know how much I don't want any money from Big Bang Theory.
I will say, I mean, I agree with what Sarah and David were saying about, you know, just I'm happy to like support the show. Like, I think people who are like complaining about this like in a very angry way are being kind of silly. But one thing that was kind of painful for me was that I was like in Australia a couple weeks ago, and of course is that so Discovery everywhere in every country but like the US and Canada, I think, just airs on Netflix because Netflix has paid like a crazy amount of money for the show as well. And that was just such a better experience than CBS All Access. So it did make me a little bit wistful for living anywhere but the US.
I mean, it's nowadays it's pretty much the feeling that you have every day. So,
well, this is why we just have to build a Star Trek style post-scarcity civilization so that all television will be free to everyone at all times. That's the world I want to live in.
Hear, hear. Make it so, I should say.
All right, well, good. I think that's a good note to end on. So we've been speaking with John Joseph Adams, Sara Lynn Michener, and Anthony Ha. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
I always enjoy it.
Thanks a lot.
Good to be here.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams, Sara Lynn Michener, and Anthony Ha for joining us on the show. Big thanks as well to Craig, who just signed up this week to support us on Patreon. I'd also like to thank William Gosling, who just increased his pledge amount. William writes, I've been listening to the show for the last year. I feel like I have a lot of similarities with Mr. Kirtley, and so very much appreciate his worldview. In one of his interviews, he mentioned a political fracas Neil Gaiman got into because of a reading he did at a library in a small Midwestern town. In the episode, Mr. Kirtley mentioned how great it would be if geeks were to become more politically active. I think if any show can help articulate a geek platform, it is this one. Let's use it. I would love to hear more about politics and politicians from the geek vantage. So big thanks again to William Gosling for that great comment, and for supporting us on Patreon. And again, if you want to support the show, you can sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks, or make a one-time contribution via check or PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And I want to give a special thank you to Brian Howry, who just made a very generous contribution to the show via PayPal. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.